Hello, I'm Amy Zaby with the Jerusalem Connection Report for Friday, November 4th. A lot that's happening in the news all over the world. I'd like to focus on a few key points this week. Every State for Israel is conducting circulating a petition on their website and on Facebook to deliver to the governor of Massachusetts to address the uptick in anti-Semitic activities within that state. Please feel free to Google or Facebook search Every State for Israel and add your name to that petition, especially if you live in Massachusetts. The petition notes the uptick in anti-Semitic activities at middle schools, high schools, communities, and in college campuses in the year 2016, almost double before the year is out of what was documented in 2015. Also reported in late October, the University of College in London had pro-Palestinians not just protest an Israeli speaker on campus, but they conducted a violent and harassing event to intimidate the attendees and the speaker. 2 Jewish students were reported having been assaulted, and police are investigating. The university leadership at this point says they are letting the police finish their investigation, as they are not sure that the perpetrators of the violence were necessarily students. However, 100 participants in this anti-Israel protest outweighed the 20 to 30 attendees and, of course, the speaker at hand. While the University College London is now beginning to recognize the gravity of these so-called protests, cell phone camera recordings delivered to police are proving the assertion that this protest was beyond just a peaceful expression of free speech, but was indeed violent. While not only are the assaults being investigated, Jewish student participants noted that they felt threatened and feared for their lives and even locked themselves inside the room as the chants were so loud and the banging on the door were also very scary. 2 protesters did actually come into the room through the window. 20 officers did respond to the event, while 100 protesters were eventually quelled. Mr. Mazig, the peace activist who was invited to speak, an Israeli who is known and renowned for being unbiased and fair-minded in the discussion of coexistence in the Middle East between Palestinians and Jews, was very surprised that he was a target. He tweeted after the event that he was surprised that he was the target, considering his topic was peace and coexistence. He also noted that the officers had to escort him out the building and told him to run as fast as he can to get away from the crowd. In addition, Mr. Mezig noted that he never felt as scared even when he was serving in the IDF. The Friends of Israel Society of UCL, University College London, has also issued a statement that it is ridiculous that Jewish students and groups need any police protection for any events. The idea of freedom of expression and free discourse should not be met with any threat or violence. And that the level of aggression that student groups and Jewish and pro-Israel supporters are feeling is just not acceptable. And that the leadership must take action to quell this atmosphere of hate. The Students for Justice in Palestine group has latched on to many civil rights agencies or groups or activities within the United States. African American groups in particular. I noted in the spring how the Black Lives Matter groups were infiltrated by Students for Justice in Palestine, and many African American leaders did not accept this coexistence or this, let's say, camaraderie. But back in 2014, a lady named Chloe Valdery penned quite an interesting letter, and she titled it "A Letter to Students for Justice in Palestine from an Angry Black Woman." In this letter, she documented all the reasons why the Students for Justice in Palestine were by no means a legitimate civil rights agency or able to legitimately call themselves freedom fighters, a resistance to oppression, or on the side of justice and equality. In her thesis-driven letter, again published in 2014 but in need of republishing, outlines very specifically why there is an illegitimacy of this claim by SJP to be any fair-minded group for helping the oppressed worldwide. She noted that they cannot claim the title of freedom fighter as long as they ignore their own early Islamic colonization, which subjugated people of all types in the Middle East and foisted upon them a life of persecution and degradation. She noted that the SJP is a quasi-Arab supremacist group, and in such that they seek to destroy the Jewish state and therefore cannot claim to any of their prejudices are being peddled as a form of legitimate resistance. She goes on to list specific areas of history in the Middle East where and current events where the Students for Justice in Palestine and BDS groups, that's Boycott, Divest, Sanctions groups, rallied support for terrorism and other discrimination against Jews and the Jewish state. And in her estimation, this nullifies any ability or claim that they are a legitimate group to serve the oppressed and have any equivalency with civil rights groups for the African American interests. She also listed a great number of African American civil rights pioneers and supporters to this day who are open Zionists, therefore supporting the State of Israel. Not only does she enumerate with specificity the SJP and BDS movement's illegitimate claim to any notion of freedom, justice, or inequality, she also notes that their freedom to chant these claims cannot be stopped. However, her people, meaning African Americans, have traditionally been Zionists and stood for freedoms of oppressed people in a very real way without discrimination, as do the SJP. And she noted that any linkage that SJP made with the causes of African American people is insulting and offensive and in fact slanderous, to invoke her history as anything equivalent to the SJP's ideas and movement. She also noticed that Dr. King's philosophies and actions were diametrically opposed to that of the SJP. Thank you, Chloe Foundry, for penning this letter and publishing it 2 years ago, and may I encourage everybody to seek it out on the internet and repost it to social media pages. And may I encourage Ms. Foundry to republish her article on college campus newsletters, opinion pages of national newspapers, and all over social media, because people need to read the excellent definition of what SJP is and the BDS movement, and it has no legitimacy to any of the many groups that are sincerely and with honesty affecting a change for rights and human rights and freedoms and justice in the United States as well as around the world. Good luck to the Americans who are off to vote this coming Tuesday. May God be with us in those results. Shavua Tov. Have a great week. Shabbat Shalom.